this guide, we'll be taking a look at all the different bot types and bosses in Pragmata. A rogue AI system called Edis has taken over the entire facility, gained access to its 3D printing technology, and it's decided to be a bit of a problematic bastard, leaving Hugh stranded on the moon, surrounded by an army of 3D printed death bots. But fortunately, he's managed to meet Diana, a Pragmata android with the power to hack into other robots and expose their weak points, which is done by navigating through a virtual box with a bunch of colourful squares. Good job they're not protected by these bloody things. So it's basically Capcom's version of The Mandalorian. But despite being a surprisingly wholesome journey, there's still a hell of a lot of stuff here that wants to kill us. One of those things is the Walker, a general purpose humanoid robot here to perform basic tasks, use tools, assist in manual work around the facility, and basically steal people's jobs. Good old AI. These guys might be the average run-of-the-mill cannon fodder enemies of Pragmata, but that doesn't make them completely and utterly useless. They're not exactly in a rush to get anywhere, probably why they're called walkers and not runners, but they are protected by an extremely durable outer shell. This also makes them stupidly hard to destroy with gunfire, much like all of the other bots in the game, which is where Diana's hacking skills come in handy to expose all of those flashy lights inside, plus allowing us to deal some respectable damage against them, before they manage to get up close and hack us to pieces with their high-powered energy cutters. And because these things are modelled off human anatomy, it only feels natural to maximise that damage by blasting them right in the noggin. But something that doesn't have a noggin is this bloody pest of a robot called the Watcher. These things are usually released from high up wall panels, and they're mainly there to do exactly what their name suggests, watch over areas and conduct basic surveillance tasks. But these security drones have also got compact railguns strapped to their undersides, just in case they need to deal with intruders using some brute force. Thankfully, these Watchers are a bit on the dozy side, so although that bright red targeting laser might look a bit intimidating, its lock-on capabilities can be countered by just simply stepping out of the way. What a fantastic piece of technology. Much like the Walker, the Crusher is another robot built to handle some of the site's manual work. It's essentially a giant walking ball of raw power, designed to carry materials, tow vehicles, trample rough terrain, and basically do a load of stuff that the average human would probably struggle with. But because these things have decided to go gangster on us too, they're now going to use all of that hefty, weighty energy against us, stomping around the place on those big mechanical chicken legs, forcing you to either jump or dive out of the way to avoid getting squished into the floor or blown back by the massive shockwaves it sends rippling through the ground. The good news is, just like the Walkers, Crushers are also really bloody slow, and once you've hacked into the mainframe to crack open that robotic ribcage, it becomes a very easy target to hit, with the top part of the robot being the main weak spot that you'll want to be pointing your guns at. But another robot ball that likes to wander around the place causing trouble is the much smaller but very agile Spider, which, if we've got any Star Wars fans out there, sorta looks a little bit like a buzz droid. The Spider is a maintenance bot, built to scuttle around the Cradle's infrastructure, welding things, patching things, and generally making itself useful. So yeah, this thing wasn't exactly built for violence, but here we are. And it's actually going to attack us in a bit of a weird way. It's not going to get its puny little welder on you, as it'll much prefer to launch itself through the air with its spindly legs whizzing around like a bladed propeller, slicing right through you as it comes kamikazeing over. This makes it a pretty mobile thing that you'll probably want to keep an eye on, but so long as you pay attention to its whereabouts, it shouldn't really cause you any big issues. Which is more than I can say for our next bot type, something that could probably rip a friggin' bus in half. The SectorGuard is the first proper boss you'll face in Pragmata, and it's a pretty beefy step up from the regular enemies we've been dealing with so far. It's basically a military unit made to protect and guard certain parts of the facility, and it's going to do just that by using an absolute crapload of explosives. This thing's got low gravity missiles, targeting systems, and stupidly powerful thruster packs, all of which should be plenty enough firepower to obliterate a typical human being, forcing you to avoid more red rings of death than an Xbox fanboy back in 2006. But despite being a pretty daunting looking robot, or mech in this case, most of its moves are pretty well telegraphed, probably why it's popped up so early on in the game. Once it's been hacked by Diana, you'll mainly want to be targeting that big ass tank stuck on the SectorGuard's back, helping to whittle down its chunky health bar to finish the fight for good. Okay, so Pragmata's not exactly a horror game, it's definitely more Dad Space than Dead Space, but that's not to say there isn't going to be a few things in here that might make us feel a bit on edge. Like say for instance, this giant creepy toddler thing that was essentially conjured up to destroy all biological life. In case you're thinking, wow, that sounds like a bit of a strange thing for a tech company run by humans to mass produce, Well, these Executor bots were actually completely generated by Edis, the AI system that's been spawning all of these nasty robots. There's definitely a parental theme going on in Pragmata, but I guess these bots sort of symbolise the chaotic side of it, because Executors sort of look and act like stroppy children, apart from those red glowing eyes, and the fact that they can just casually retract their faces to shoot you with a high-powered laser beam. Most kids can't do that. They spend big chunks of their time jumping around, slamming into the ground, throwing boisterous tantrums, and crawling around on the floor to try and ram you with an electrified stumpy thing. Though about halfway through the fight, that stumpy thing is going to generate emergency shield antennas, making the Executor look like some sort of cybernetic demogorgon. And these shields will need to be destroyed if you want to keep hacking it to reveal those weak spots, like the very fragile tubes that stick out of the robot's back. You'll definitely want to be aiming for those. We've already met the Watcher with its hilariously slow railgun. Now it's time to meet its more explosive but still fairly rubbish counterpart known as the Missile Watcher. No points for guessing how this thing's going to attack. Well, it is indeed armed with a mini printer that can generate an endless supply of missiles which can lock onto our position. Sounds pretty deadly. But there's a catch. Those missiles are just as slow as that bloody railgun, giving us plenty of time to hack into them while they're floating their way towards us at the speed of an elderly bumblebee. Hacked missiles can be returned to sender, thus blowing the Watcher up with its own munitions, making it an easier target to finish off in the usual sort of manner. And once again, this Watcher variant is very similar to the other, acting more of a combat disruptor rather than something that's going to pose a massive problem on its own. Unless you're a bit crap at playing the game, that is. But something that probably is more likely to cause you problems is the next main boss that you'll need to tackle. Basically a ginormous mountain of a robot called the Creator, which is some kind of giant pot-bellied frog thing with a face like a hammerhead shark. The Creator is easily the most dynamic bot type that we've ran into so far, though with it being such a hefty lump of metal, you can expect a lot of its attacks to come in the form of stomps and slams, which is kinda typical for bosses of this size. Why waste a load of energy zapping your opponent with fancy lasers when you can just step on them? But this thing does have a bunch of fancy lasers that it likes to use quite often too, charging around the arena, unleashing a load of death rays from its neck, which comes showering down on you from above, causing you to run out of the way to prevent being fried to crap. Just like the Executor, the Creator's also got access to some of those shield antennas too, which are there to block off your hacking abilities, therefore giving the bot's weak spots an extra layer of protection. Though as the fight rages on, the attacks will ramp up a few notches, with the boss using its printing abilities to generate loads of spiky obstacles and other random objects to come shooting out from the floor below. It might be pretty good at making stuff, but it's also just as good at destroying stuff too. One pretty big step up from the Walker bot is the fairly similar but much more violent Lancer, aka the UFO head. Also equipped with a light blade cutting tool for slicing through thick material, or slicing through your squishy chest cavity if you're not paying attention. Unlike the Walkers though, which take forever to get anywhere and need to be very close by before they can do any harm, the Lancer's upgraded arm mount is cram-packed with a hell of a lot more power, hence why it's got such a beefy looking shoulder unit. And this allows the robot to propel its attacks over a much further distance, sort of creating a high-powered laser beam which can be jabbed forwards to impale anything that stands before it. In essence, kinda like a lance. That boosted range and higher levels of aggression usually puts these guys higher up in the pecking order, something you should be quite wary about when taking on multiple enemies at the same time. Though once again, you'll want to be aiming for that head whenever it's been hacked, which in this case is a much thinner target, being a rotating disc which spins around scanning the area for possible threats. With our next bot being called the Impeder, you could probably guess that it's going to be a bit of a nuisance. These things were originally designed to be security drones, there to restrain anyone that might be a threat with unlethal force. Basically the robot equivalent to wire police. They're armed with EMP pulses and unguided rockets, which can be fired out all over the floor like little danger flowers, only for them to open up and discharge electrical energy moments later, stunning the poor human trying to run away from them. This obviously makes the Impeder a much more disruptive enemy type, which generally prefers to hang back and litter the combat zone with annoying hazards. But of course, Edis doesn't really care very much about human health and safety policies, so the Impeders have also been programmed to try and burn the living crap out of them with its jet thrusters too, which is more of a reason to hack the bloody pest and shoot its dopey little ball head off. Just like any modern piece of technology, there's always plenty of room for an upgrade. There's 5 different Mark II variants of the basic bots running amok in the facility, easily distinguished from the normal ones because they look like they've been designed by McLaren. The Walker is a pretty obvious thing that needed a good boost, with the Mark II model being a faster, deadlier variant with enhanced agility, along with much more ferocious attacks. Able to dodge incoming gunfire more effectively, while being able to hit harder with its arm-mounted blade. The painfully slow railgun on the Watcher has been modified to a rapid-fire configuration, kind of acting more like a fully automatic machine gun, with its shots now being a lot trickier to avoid, especially in hectic scenarios while other enemies are getting involved too. The upgraded Missile Watcher is capable of firing a couple of those rockets at once to give you even more things to try and hack and avoid during the fight, once again posing more of a problem when shit hits the fan. The Crusher Mark II is an even stompier menace with better sensors and broadened attack range, being a modified variant that was redesigned entirely by Aegis, basically by copying the design from the other Mark II series bots. And last but not least, we've got the dreaded Spider Mark II, another thing conjured up by Aegis. This pesky thing's got stronger armor, and it's also been given a brand new spin attack too, which can be a lot harder to get out of the way of, but it's pretty much turned the bloody thing into a giant mechanical Beyblade. One bot that might be easily mistaken for some kind of Crusher variant is another big ball of trouble called the Bomber. No surprise how this thing's going to attack us, being a robot designed to lob a bunch of explosives down on the floor to create mining shafts through the moon's crust. And that's exactly what you can expect it to do here, with those bombs being telegraphed by blue light indicators, which are generally flung out all over the place or shot out in a straight line ahead of it. It's a fairly predictable enemy, especially with it being kind enough to tell you exactly where its bombs are going to be going, but it's still a pretty good one for amplifying the chaos nevertheless, with its shitstorm of electrical explosions and EMP pulses. Best way to go about things here is to lower its defenses and then shoot it in the balls. Out of all the bots in Pragmata, the Creeper is probably the one that's going to catch you off guard the most. It's another one of those enemies that wants to be in a horror game but somehow ended up here instead, often found lurking around in the darkness trying to hide behind an invisibility cloak. It's a robot designed to capture and detain targets by grabbing a hold of them with its freaky looking ribcage, and if you're not expecting a Creeper to be there, then it'll probably make you jump out of your skin. The fact that it also kinda looks a bit like a robotic tarantula probably doesn't exactly help either. If a Creeper does emerge from the shadows to give you a big fat hug, then Diana's gonna need to hack it quickly to stop Hugh from being viciously cuddled. With that said, the invisibility cloak's not only there to conceal the Creeper, but it's also there to block your hacking abilities too, forcing you to either wait around for it to deactivate, or force it out of stealth mode by blasting away the shimmering bubble generated by the cloak. Probably one of the wildest bots in the whole of Pragmata, the Garden Keeper is the next boss we'll be facing deep in the bowels of the Terradome, and it's basically a massive robot scorpion with a load of random arms waving around everywhere. It's sort of a hybrid between the transport and agricultural bot, but of course that's not deadly enough on its own, so Aegis has shoved a big ass laser blasting tail on the end of the bloody thing. A tail which is going to whip around the place to cover a wide area, and slam down on top of your head if you're not being vigilant. Unlike a lot of the other bots we've taken on so far though, this thing is very agile and very energetic, mainly because its limbs are enhanced with ferrofluid actuators, or in layman's terms, it's got 6 really f***ing fast legs. But those legs aren't just going to be used to dash around the arena, they're also going to be used to propel the big machine up into the air, allowing it to body slam you from a distance and move around the place in a fairly unpredictable way. Thankfully, that rapid mobility is counteracted by the boss having quite a lot of weak spots all over its head, body and tail, that you can generally see from all angles. Though when it decides to scramble up a wall to fry you with its lasers, then hacking the machine might be a bit harder to do, with it probably being out of range of Diana's sensors. One of the rarer bot types that only seems to pop up in certain training missions is this pesky little thing called the Reassembler. These guys are the field medics of the game, maintenance bots that hover around the combat zone looking for other busted up bots to try and repair with lunar filament. While it's patching up another robot, that other robot can't be hacked, meaning you'll need to deal with the Reassembler first, which can actually end up causing more harm to the bot it's trying to fix, depending on your hacking choices. When there's no other bots around though, or when the ones that are around don't actually need repairing, then the Reassembler's just going to chill in one place minding its own business, being one of the only things in the game that doesn't actually want to attack us directly. But something that certainly does have weapons is the appropriately named Gunner, which is literally just a big robot gun turret. These things look kinda similar to the Impeders, which we saw a little bit earlier on, and they were originally designed to be anti-air defense cannons, used for shooting down incoming explosives. But Aegis has other plans for them, as those beefy cannons are now going to be pointed at poor Hugh instead. They're going to pepper the ground with ballistic missiles, launching some pretty wide artillery strikes on our position. As we get a little bit closer to the robot, then it's going to switch over to a rapid fire mode instead, targeting us with laser designators before ripping the place up with streams of gunfire. With all that said, these things are locked in a set position, and their aiming mechanism seems to be really friggin' slow. Not to mention that their globe-headed weak spots are about as durable as plastic shopping bags. So they might have a lot of firepower, but they're not exactly very good at taking the flak themselves. Sometimes teamwork makes the dream work, and although most of the bots in Pragmata just go about things with a bit of a lone wolf mindset, the Defender, aka the big angry chicken bot, is willing to put itself out on the front line to protect all the other bots behind it with a massive bloody barrier. This robot once protected the people working in the lunar base from potentially dangerous hazards, and now it's basically become a potentially dangerous hazard, because it's not only going to prevent the bots in the background from getting hit by all your gunfire and hacks, but it's also going to weaponize its shields to force you backwards, and generally make fights a bit more awkward than they really need to be. Not exactly great when you're in a really narrow space. Thankfully, you can just blast away at the 4 central nodes to get rid of the barrier for good, exposing the Defender and all of his buddies to your attacks. But don't be surprised if it gets a bit pissed off by you doing that, spinning its chicken wings around and throwing a tantrum while it chases you around the room trying to slap you into oblivion. Time to bring out the big guns. The Air Raider is practically a flying tank, with a stupid number of weapons and fancy high-tech gadgets, and it sorta makes the Watcher look like the robotic equivalent to a pigeon. These prototype drones were designed to be used by the military division, though because their designs were so expensive and really bloody complex, they were never actually mass-produced. Aegis isn't bothered about that though because it doesn't pay the bills, so it's generated a few of these bad boys anyway to come and hunt you down with their vast array of bombs, lasers, mines, and everything else in between. They're pretty fast robots considering the size of them, and because they spend a lot of time hovering around in the distance, they're not particularly the easiest things in the world to hit with your weapons. The Sweeper is probably the most mysterious bot in the game, having unknown origins while behaving in a very different way to pretty much everything else. These shiny UFO dudes can be found hovering around in random places, but if you get too close or try to hack them, then they're going to wake up and fly away, zigzagging around the room to make them very awkward to chase. Sweepers don't actually fight back, and they're going to keep pooping out lunar filament as they float on by. Though if you do manage to hack one before it gets away, then you'll be rewarded with a nice pile of loot for your troubles. But actually doing that can be easier said than done. Just because they won't attack you doesn't mean they can't give you a headache.
Damn it, lost it.
So practically all of the base's technology revolves around lunar filament, a special material made from ore that was discovered deep within the moon's surface. This meant that it had to be excavated using mining shafts, and because robots practically do everything in this place, there's one designed to do that job too. The LunaDigger is basically a giant robotic worm covered in rock grinders, which is just about as dangerous as that sounds. Aegis has reprogrammed this thing to gobble up humans, and it's going to patrol large areas of open ground, often ground that you'll need to try and cross. Shouldn't be too hard so long as you move quickly, but you're probably best staying elevated whenever you can. Eventually you'll wind up in a big battle arena with this thing, with it now being one of the game's main bosses. It's still going to try and eat you with its massive grinder gob, but it's also going to do a bunch of other tricks here too, and because nearly all the bosses seem to like lasers so much, it's also got one of those as well. Of course it does. One thing the other bosses don't have though is a bunch of little minions, as the LunaDigger's body can shed some of its scales which turn into independent bots called Digbits. Now these things like to zip around the place trying to run you over, but hacking them will cause the bots to go charging towards the digger instead, helping you to chip away at that health bar, thus making the boss an easier thing to finish off with hacks and guns. One of the downsides to working with lunar filament is that it can create a toxic byproduct called dead filament, which is capable of dissolving organic matter, interfering with machines, and generally being a very nasty thing to have around the place, in a way sort of acting like alien parasitic gloop. This corruption can be seen growing all over certain parts of the facility, though it's had a pretty weird effect on some of the bots here too, with the dead filament latching on to contaminate them. So now we've got to contend with these funky looking slug bots, which are slightly more aggressive and a little bit more awkward to hack. But otherwise these things are generally going to act in the same sort of way as before, aside from being able to generate a bunch of spikes and blow up like a pufferfish. Once Diana's gained a special cleanse ability though, you'll be able to purify the bots of that dead filament to make hacking a lot easier to do again. Definitely the best way to take care of these things. But walkers aren't the only thing getting corrupted by dead filament, because those big angry baby bots are also prone to being contaminated by this stuff too. Obviously, getting into a fight with a dead filament covered Executor is going to give us a bit more of a challenge, having the same bonus traits as the Anomalous Walkers, but also being able to fire out blobs of purple gunk too, which hone onto your position and therefore need to be destroyed with that cleanse ability before it does some damage. Those cleanse shockwaves help to remove the corruption from the Executor, but this time they'll also reveal new weak spots too, in the form of these big spiky orange growths. And if you give these a good blasting with your weapons, then that's going to deal a nice chunk of extra damage, stopping the dead filament from growing back, plus reverting the robot into a regular Executor again, albeit one that's got a pretty messed up face. Kinda looks like someone shoved a Terminator in the oven. One of the wackier looking bot types in Pragmata is another case of dead filament and machine being mashed together, but this time it's taken the form of something completely new, rather than just being another variant. The Anomaly is a bit of a mysterious alien looking thing, which is basically part robot, with corruption bursting out from its insides to create a pair of long gangly tentacles. These guys are one of the deadliest enemy types in the game, and despite being limited to just melee strikes, their attacks can reach over a pretty wide span, because of those stretchy jelly arms. But just like other contaminated bots, cleansing them will reveal those shiny weak spots, and basically rip off their arms in the process. But you do need to be aware of their special party trick, where they like to split their entire face and neck open like a flower, and then go on to run around the place trying to take a chomp out of you. Just because it's armless doesn't mean it's harmless. Well, arguably the most badass bot designed by the Delphi Corporation, the Sentinel is sort of what you'd get if you shrunk down one of the Transformers and then turned it into a friggin' ninja. It's another one of the game's bosses, or at least it feels a bit like a boss down to the sheer number of attacks it likes to use against us, armed with a shoulder-mounted rocket launcher and a pair of energy wrist blades, zipping around the arena, slicing away at us up close, or jumping backwards to take shots at us from afar, basically covering all ranges pretty damn well. Because the Sentinel moves and attacks in such a fast and ferocious way, it's much more likely to slap you around the place if you're not keeping a close eye on it, which can be especially problematic while you're being distracted by Diana's little hacking puzzles. Sentinels are also coated in a layer of dead filament too, which needs to be wiped away first to make them a lot easier to hack and deal damage to. And to top it all off, that dead filament can return to the bot after it summons a load of it back into the room to create a deadly storm of purple mist, which charges up to generate a huge explosion, forcing you to run to the back of the room to stay the hell out of its powerful blast radius. Time for the spoiler warning, guys. We've reached the final bosses of the game, which sort of link in a bit more with the story and the characters, just to give you a bit of a heads up. Well, the cat's out of the bag. There's another Pragmata android in the facility known as 8, but she's definitely not all sweet and innocent like little sister Diana. 8's the main reason why the whole place has fallen into disarray. She's hacked into Abiosis, used it to wipe out the humans in the station, and now plans to send toxic dead filament to Earth so we can wipe out all the people there too. So yeah, she's not exactly very pleasant. But that's mainly because she's been corrupted by dead filament herself, and it's also because she shares her master's sadness and hatred towards the Delphi company, which 8's roughly misinterpreted as destroy all humans. Anyway, at the very end of our journey, 8 basically transforms into a super advanced version of herself with a bunch of writhing tentacles, completely infused with dead filament, which can be seen flowing right the way through the android's body. Being the final boss and all, we can expect 8, who's now called Idea, to have a pretty strong mix of attributes. She's very fast, very powerful, soaks up a load of damage, covered in filament that will need to be cleansed, and in typical final boss fashion, she's got loads of different attacks to cover both short and longer ranges, most of which are going to come from those tentacles whipping and jabbing forwards, in between generating floaty balls of death, which follow you around the place, proving to be a bit of a pest. But about halfway through the fight, 8's going to activate Badass mode, where she'll suddenly become a lot more aggressive. Also now giving her access to some kind of firewall, which makes Diana's hacks a lot trickier to complete. This is where the proper fight begins, with attacks being tougher to avoid and hitting harder too, especially with many of them now creating dead filament shockwaves. Though just before you get to finish her off for good, 8's got one more trick up her sleeve to try and cheese the fight and finish you off instead, hovering high up in the air and basically raining down an absolute crap ton of projectiles onto the floor below. Though so long as you survive that final onslaught, then you've not really got too much left to do here. Well, what in the G-Virus do we have here? We're not quite done just yet, because after we've dealt with 8, who was technically the final boss of the game, we'll now need to contend with a massive rampaging pile of dead filament, known as the Abiosis, which wants to crawl its way up to the top of the orbital elevator to cause some unwanted carnage up there. You and Diana need to stop this thing before it manages to do that, and luckily enough, they happen to find a flying mech suit with a big ass cannon strapped to it, which should come in pretty handy. This isn't exactly a proper boss fight, mainly just being a flashy on-rail sequence where you'll need to perform some simple hacks and just hit the right trigger a few times. It's a cool little cinematic sequence nevertheless, but that's kind of all there is to this encounter. With the main story done and dusted, I probably shouldn't ignore the fact that there's also a bunch of enhanced boss variants that you'll be able to fight too, should you choose to play the special post-game mode called Unknown Signal, which you probably should do. This mode gives you a whole bunch of new challenges to go and complete, and it also gives you the opportunity to fight Mark II variants of all the game's major bosses. So pretty much everything from the SectorGuard and the Creator, right the way up to the Sentinel and even the final boss battle with Impeder. Obviously, being enhanced versions of the bosses, you can expect these rematches to be a little bit tougher the second time around, though you've already taken them all down first, so you should probably have a good idea on what to expect when you jump into the ring with them again. So they shouldn't be too hard to take down again, especially if you've maxed out some of your guns and your abilities. So there we have it folks, those are all the different bot types in Pragmata. Give me a thumbs up if you enjoyed the video, and if you want to see more enemy guides just like this, then just hop on over to my channel where you'll be able to find a hell of a lot more. Special thanks to all my channel members for your support, it's very much appreciated, and thanks for watching this video to the very end.